Current Review, Central News Live. My name is Thamsanqa Tu, sometimes known as TT, sometimes known as Chairman. We are back this morning in a conversation that has, that definitely has to concern a lot of us as citizens of the Free State, citizens of the country, because this conversation is about issues that affect us directly as citizens. This exclusive conversation that we're going to be having today, we sit down with Armand Cloete, a member of the Free State Provincial Legislature representing the Freedom Front Plus. We will be discussing the alarming report he released, highlighting how Free State municipalities have forfeited a staggering 3.8 billion in conditional grants. These funds, meant to address critical infrastructure and improve the lives of the residents, were returned to the National Treasury due to poor governance under the ANC's leadership. That is what Mr. Cloete will delve into as we discuss the consequences of this mismanagement, the impact on communities, and what solutions may lie ahead for the province. Please stay tuned as we unpack these issues. Good morning, Mr. Cloete. In your statement, you highlighted that the Free State municipalities have, given over 3.8 billion in conditional grants. Could you provide us with more context on how these funds were allocated and what led to their forfeiture?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Thamsanqa. And let me start by thanking you for having me on, and good day to our viewers as well. Maybe we should just take a step backwards just to understand what grants are. So what grants are supposed to do is that's money that's being allocated to provinces through the equitable share from National Treasury, and grants are specifically developed to attend to, let's say, infrastructure, maintenance and repairs and projects in especially your poor communities. But these are funds that come from the national fiscus. Now, if you add or if you look at the funding model for municipalities, municipalities basically have two streams of income. One is through rates and taxes, and then the other one would be from the national government. So I had a look at all the grants, conditional grants. We'll get into conditional grants a little bit later, but all the grants municipalities should have access to. There are quite a few. I've counted 19. There might even be more, but there are basically 19 grants that are available where municipalities can request funding from National Treasury. I know that 12 of these 19 are actually infrastructure projects. So I asked a question to the MEC for Kotsi quite recently, asking him to indicate how much money was surrendered. So the condition of one of these conditional grants are any money you don't spend in a financial year, you are supposed to surrender or give back to National Treasury. So it's not yours anymore. If you don't use it in your province or in your municipality, you're supposed to surrender it. And then usually it will be distributed to other municipalities or provinces where they actually in need for those additional funds. So I asked the MEC to indicate in the last 8 years, since 2016, how much money was surrendered by Free State municipalities. And yesterday we received the answer. And as you alluded, the question from the MEC was that we had lost 3.8 billion rand in conditional grant surrenders the past 8 years, and that's actually quite worrying. Now, I know you're going to ask me regarding the details of these grants. I must just say my question was limited to only the surrenders. I'm not quite sure at this stage which projects they were supposed to fund. It was a global amount we received, but yes, it's staggering and it's worrying because, like I said earlier, these funds are supposed to improve the lives of poor people, but we simply don't see that. Surrendering at 3.8 billion rand in 8 years is not looking after the poor.
And yeah, you're right. My question would have followed as such. But you also mentioned that the Mangaung Metro was the biggest culprit, having to repay over 1.9 billion. And I suppose, therefore, you do not know what specific projects those grants were intended for, and what do you believe went wrong in terms of the project execution? You wouldn't have those details, right?
I won't have the details, but let me just say, I've just had a look at the recent Auditor General report, and the Auditor General highlighted 8 material irregularities. Now, what that entails is basically the Auditor General looks at expenditure on, let's say, projects, and sometimes they see that payments were made for projects, and the municipality says that these projects are either almost at an end, or they're finalized, completed, and then the Auditor General reports go and look at the value for money for those projects. And in many instances across the province, in Mangaung's instance, 8 material irregularities, which means they say that there is no evidence for value for money for those projects. So yes, these are things that are happening in Mangaung, and as I highlighted in my statement as well, many other municipalities also have quite a few of these projects, and conditional grants that is not being used properly to the benefit of the people.
And it would seem that the issue of these forfeitures is not isolated, but quite widespread. You pointed out other municipalities like Sesotho, Ngwathe, and Machabeng. What do you believe is the root cause for these widespread failures across the province?
I think there are 4 root causes for these issues in the Free State, especially. They might be across the country, but I think in the Free State there are 4 basic issues that need to be attended to quite quickly. The first one is poor project management. So we see many of these municipalities they would have project managers, but those project managers aren't properly trained. They don't have the know-how, so they don't really know how to get these projects from the ground up to initiate these projects. We know in the Free State especially, you'll see that in the first and second quarter of many projects and many of these conditional grant spendings, it's quite slow because they are lacking to appoint the contractors, and they are lacking to appoint the correct contractors. Now, when we go to contractors, I think the second issue is that contractors are not vetted properly. So they're not checked whether they have done, whether they have completed tenders and projects in the past. There should be a system, and there ought to be a system where these contractors are vetted to see, can they do the job, have they done it, and what's the quality of their work. So that's one of the second issues. I think also contractor liquidity is an issue. You'll see that contractors get the tenders, but sometimes they have a cash flow problem, and then they start issuing statements issuing statements to municipalities for work that have not completed. So sometimes these contractors don't have liquidity, and then ultimately, and I think this is a big major problem in the Free State especially, is that lack of political will. What I mean by that is, many of these money is supposed to be spent in our wards. That's where these things happen, in our municipalities, but also in our towns and in our wards. Now, in those wards, you have ward councillors who are supposed to have a good idea what's going on with those projects and funding and spending, but we don't see necessarily that ward councillors actually oversee those projects as well, because councillors also have an oversight competency and mandate. And I think that's one of the biggest issues, is that there's no political will to oversee these projects as from a political point of view. And I think ward councillors are very important there, but we don't see them playing their oversight role politically.
Your statement also, addresses the impact of Black economic empowerment and affirmative action policies. as well as carer deployment. How have these policies, in your view, contributed to the state of governance in the Free State?
Before we go into the Free State and the issue of policy, let me start by saying this. Of course, we want to see empowerment amongst South Africans and especially Black people, given our history. So let's start from there. But we need empowerment through education and skills development. That's where we are lacking currently, and even mentorship programs. We are not seeing our vulnerable people being empowered through education and mentorship. The current model we are seeing with Black economic empowerment only empowers a few. We are creating well, we are still creating, we've been doing it for quite a few years now, but under the ANC, we are seeing a political elite that is growing. I remember an MEC, I'm not going to mention his name, mentioning or bragging about creating overnight millionaires in the Free State. Now, I was taught the moment someone promises you to become a overnight millionaire, you should start thinking whether it's not a Ponzi scheme. That's on a lighter note. But that's what we are trying to create currently, is these overnight millionaires, but we don't see real empowerment on skills, education, and training on that level. Add to that, how many times do we hear about contractors from other provinces being appointed in the Free State to conduct their work here? I'm not saying we shouldn't allow for Gauteng, whoever, but they have no real economic investment here other than getting money from the province. And the moment they complete the project, they leave the province, and that money is lost to the province. So we need to start looking at our local people as well. But then there's a need for local people. We should start training them. So what we are saying, and we even included this in our plan to the president, I think it was 2022, in our approach to rebuild the economy of the country. And this is especially true for the Free State, is that we should be looking at a system, not BEE anymore, not affirmative action, not cadre deployment, because cadre deployment is just another word for a political connected elite. But we should be looking at a practice like black education and skills training. But we should actually broaden that view. But currently, the model of BEE is only creating a few rich people, and the most Black people are not being empowered by the system.
Okay, and water and sanitation services have been highlighted as a major concern in many Free State communities. Could you elaborate on how the mismanagement of these grants has affected service delivery and infrastructure development in these particular sectors?
Let's go to a municipality, I think, where water and sanitation issues are a major concern. That's Matjhabeng local municipality. We all know the water issues and the sanitation issues there. An interesting fact about Matjhabeng is in the 2021 financial year, they were only able to spend 20% of their municipal infrastructure grants. Now think about that. That's 20%. 80% that was then reallocated or surrendered to National Treasury. So these funds were not used. Now we are seeing the issue of water. Matjhabeng is losing almost 50% of its water it's buying through leakages, through illegal connections as well. Sanitation issues have not been improving, although the minister was there in 2022, I think it was there, and he promised a lot of money to Matjhabeng, but there was no improvement there. But there are many towns in the Free State. Currently, Tebogo, major water issues there. In Guate, in Guate, at that waterworks, they've appointed 7 contractors, and there has been no improvement on that waterworks there. So these are issues that appears to be a culture of non-spending, but also poor project management. And ultimately that leads to the disasters we are seeing across the province currently.
Mm-hmm. And as the situation stands, what role can opposition parties like like the like the FF Plus play in addressing these issues and holding the ANC accountable for the continued loss of funds meant for critical projects and infrastructure?
In the Free State, we've got a special situation because if you recollect, just after the recent elections, the ANC managed to get 16 of the 30 seats in the Free State Legislature. They retained the majority, but with a fraction. So there was an interesting situation where the ANC actually did not have enough members for all the committees. Now, there were discussions, and ultimately it was decided that between the ANC, ourselves, the EFF, and the Democratic Alliance, we are going to share a committee chairpersons. I'm committee of the governance committee chairperson of the governance cluster. But we are going to work there. I've said to the Premier and even to our committee members that we are committed ourselves to rebuilding and building the Free State. We need to do that. And that if that means that we should hold the ANC accountable in the committees, we are definitely going to do that. But we speak about accountability and what should people do. We just quickly had a discussion about the shutdown for tomorrow. But every 5 years, in the different spheres of government, we go through an accountability exercise, what we call elections. And that's, I think, in my mind, where the real accountability should be. If you're voting for a party who's actually surrendering money to National Treasury, you should ask yourself, are they working for me or against me? And that's where the true accountability is. So yes, we will continue to play our role as opposition in the Free State Legislature and even in the councils where we are elected. But ultimately, we are going into another election season, and we should start asking ourselves whether that government is working for me or that municipality is working for me or against me.
And finally, you mentioned that billions have been returned to the National Treasury over the past decade. What immediate action should be taken by the provincial government to reverse this trend and ensure that the future grants are spent effectively?
I think the first thing we should do is we should start looking at merit appointments, not cadre deployments. That's the most important issue currently in the Free State. We should be appointing horses for courses, in other words, people who can do the job. But also we should go into a situation where in politics they speak about draining the swamp. All the bad apples should be we should go through a process to get rid of the bad apples in government, whether it's in the municipalities or in the provincial government. But we need to get rid of those bad apples, those people who are not working. They are receiving salaries from taxpayers' money, our money, your and my money, and they start working for us. So let's get rid of the bad apples, and let's start with merit appointments. Let's start appointing people who can actually do the job. And it's got nothing to do with color here. Let's go into that. Appoint the people who can do the job. And that's the most important, I think we should attend to right now.
Armand Cloete, the Freedom Front Plus representative in the Free State Legislature, thank you very much for your time. We hope that you are able to help resolve the issues that we find ourselves in as the people of the Free State. Thank you very much for your time. That was Armand Cloete, the Freedom Front Plus, talking to us about the state of the municipalities having lost so much money over the last 8 years to the National Treasury because of inability to spend for whatever reason. That was for today. We are out. We'll be back with an